Shadow froze. 1 second, the dog was a black Belgian Malinois, a 70-pound ghost gliding through the high desert sagebrush. The next, he was a statue of coiled muscle, head down, body rigid. His ears, two black satellites locked forward. He didn't bark. Barking was for pets. This was the alert. 100 yards upwind, Eli Vance didn't move either. He didn't breathe. He just watched his partner. The dog, trained on a scent profile so specific it was almost theoretical, was pointing. Pointing at the one man-made object in this 20-square-mile wasteland. Train car 734. Eli raised his cracked binoculars. Rusted graffiti, dead steel, but the dog didn't lie. Then Eli saw it. On the steel step of the car, gleaming in the weak sun, was a fresh boot print. The mud was still wet. Boom! You feel that? That's the hook. That's the tension. If you want to find out who's in that train car, and if Eli and Shadow are the hunters or the hunted, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Click the bell. Don't go anywhere. You need to see what happens next. Eli gave the low 2-click command with his tongue. It was the release signal. Shadow didn't break formation. He just unlocked his joints, sinking lower, and began a silent, looping retreat back to Eli's position. Whoever was in that car was either gone or they were very, very good. Eli didn't like either option. He and the dog were ghosts. They didn't run. They evaporated back into the brown and gray landscape, melting back toward the one place Eli tolerated, his 30-foot Airstream trailer, parked 2 miles away and invisible from the siding. That train car wasn't his problem. Eli's only job was to be left alone. An hour later, the dust plume appeared in the east. Eli saw it from a mile away. Shadow, alerted by the sound long before Eli saw the dust, was already standing at the Airstream's door, hackles not raised, just present. Eli stepped outside, wiping grease from an engine part onto an already black rag. He was a tall man, hollowed out, built of wire and old wounds. He stood in the path of the oncoming vehicle, a gesture that was both indifferent and an absolute blockade. The car was a 2010 Ford Taurus, white, with county plates. It struggled over the rutted dirt track, its suspension groaning. It pulled up 20 feet from Eli. The engine died, ticking in the heat. The man who got out was the opposite of Eli. He was soft, sweating through a cheap polyester suit, and his face was pink with anxiety. He was holding a briefcase in one hand and a half-empty, lukewarm Diet Coke in the other. "Mr. Vance, Elias Vance?" the man puffed, adjusting his tie. Eli just watched. The silence in the high desert was louder than any city. I'm Arthur Finch," the lawyer said, his voice cracking. "From the county probate office? I sent a letter. I called. You don't have a phone." Eli waited. Shadow at his side was perfectly still, watching the man's hands. The lawyer noticed, and his sweat doubled. "God, it's hot. Look, this is highly irregular. I had to drive 80 miles. Finch, realizing no small talk was coming, fumbled with his briefcase. "Sir, your uncle, a Mr. Marcus Hemlock. He's passed." Eli's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed a fraction. "I don't have an uncle," he said. His voice was like gravel and rust. "Well, apparently you did," Finch stammered, intimidated. He died, and he named you. You're the sole heir." "Heir to what?" "Well, that's the thing," Finch said, shuffling papers. "He didn't leave much. No money, no property, really. Just all remaining personal effects, which, according to the county assessor, is just one item." The lawyer looked up from his papers, his face a mix of pity and confusion. "Train car 734 on the old Hemlock sighting." The words hit Eli like a physical blow. The coincidence was too perfect. It was a setup, the boot print, the alert, and now this. "I don't want it," Eli said. "You don't understand, son. You already own it. The county's glad to have it off the books. But he also left this. He was very specific. Personally to Elias and no one else." Finch pulled a thick manila envelope from his briefcase. It was old, sealed not with glue but with a lump of dark red wax. "And this," the lawyer said, digging in his pocket. He pulled out a single, heavy, ornate brass key. I guess it's the key to the car." Finch was desperate to leave. He shoved the papers at Eli to sign. "Look, my condolences or whatever. Just sign here, here, and here, acknowledging receipt." Eli took the pen, signed his name, a quick, disciplined scrawl, and took the envelope and the key. Finch practically ran back to his Taurus, fumbling his keys and spun the car around, spraying dust and rocks. He was gone. Eli stood in the settling dust. Shadow nudged his hand, a check-in. He looked at the key. It was heavy, worn. He looked at the envelope. He broke the wax seal. Inside was a single piece of paper. Not a legal document. It was old, faded military stationery, the kind with the "from the desk of Heir." The handwriting was hard, fast, and disciplined. Eli's stony expression didn't just crack, it broke. He knew this handwriting. He knew this man. It wasn't his uncle. It was First Sergeant Marcus Hemlock, his first K-9 commander, the man who trained him, the man who built him, the man Eli thought had died in a firefight in Kunar province 10 years ago. The note was short, 6 words. "Eli, they got me. It's in the wall." Eli closed his hand around the key until his knuckles turned white. He looked at the train car, 2 miles distant, shimmering in the heat. It wasn't a piece of junk. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a goddamn message. He looked at Shadow. "Well, boy," he rasped, "looks like we're going back." The walk back to the train car was not a walk. It was an infiltration. Eli Vance moved with the hard-won, economical grace of a man who had spent a decade trying to not be seen. The high desert offered no cover, only distance, and the sun was a ruthless orange eye, beginning its slow bleed toward the western horizon. Shadow, his K-9, moved in perfect tandem, a black streak against the brown dirt, his paws making no sound. The dog was not an animal. He was a force multiplier. Eli had the key in his left hand, his right hand free. He never approached a new objective with his primary hand full. That was lesson 1, taught to him by the same man who wrote the note. Marcus Hemlock, alive and then dead. The thought was a cold stone in his gut. The military had listed Hemlock as killed in action in the Kunar, a catastrophic IED. Eli had mourned him, packed that grief away in the same mental footlocker he kept all the other ghosts, and moved on. Now, a decade later, it seemed the man hadn't died in a war zone. He died here, in the middle of nowhere, because of something in the wall. They reached the siding. Train car 734 stood like a rusted steel tombstone. Eli didn't go for the door. "Watch," he commanded in a low voice. Shadow immediately sat, locking his gaze on the 60-degree arc of the fatal funnel, the doorway. He was the sentinel. Eli did a full sweep of the car's exterior. He looked for wires. He looked for disturbed earth, fresh scratches, anything that signaled a trap. He found only the boot print he'd seen earlier. Old, but not ancient. Within the last 48 hours. He returned to the door. The lock was an old, heavy-duty brass cylinder. It was dirty, but the keyway itself was surprisingly clean. He inserted the heavy brass key. It turned with a smooth, oiled click that felt wrong. Too new. The door was heavy. He slid it open 6 inches, his body flat against the steel, using the car's wall as cover. He waited. Silence. He sniffed the air. Dust. Rat droppings, the metallic tang of decay. "Clear," he commanded. Shadow, low and fast, dove through the 6-inch gap. He was a black blur. Eli listened. He heard the dog's claws on the wood floor, moving in a practiced, diamond-patterned sweep of the interior. 1 minute passed, 2. A soft woof came from inside, the all-clear signal. Eli slid the door open the rest of the way and entered, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. The car was a hollowed-out husk. Old velvet seats were slashed to their wooden bones. The floor was a minefield of trash and animal waste. Sunlight streamed through bullet holes in the ceiling. "In the wall," the note said. It was a 70-foot-long car. That was a lot of wall. Eli started at the front, his search methodical. He was a human scanner. He wasn't just looking, he was feeling. He pressed his palms against the rotting wood panels, feeling for give, for a hollow space. He tapped his knuckles, listening for a change in acoustic. Thud, 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 thunk. He stopped. The sound was different, but the wood panel was nailed tight. He tried to pry it with his boot knife, but it was solid. Shadow, up. The dog leaped onto a rotten seat. "Seek," Eli said, tapping the wall. Shadow, the most sophisticated detection tool on Earth, began to work. He didn't sniff for drugs or explosives. He was sniffing for difference, for glue, for cut steel, for the disturbed molecules of a hidden space. He worked for 5 minutes, sniffing every inch of the wall. Eli waited. His patience was absolute. Then Shadow alerted. It was unmistakable. He stopped at a different panel, this one made of steel near the back of the car. It looked like every other panel, but Shadow became intense, his tail rigid, his nose pushing hard against one specific rivet. Then he gave a sharp, definitive scratch with his front paw. Here. Eli examined the panel. It was steel, painted over. But Shadow was right. The rivets on this panel were different. They were modern pop rivets, while the others were century-old heat-pressed bolts. Good boy, Eli murmured. He took a multi-tool from his belt and used the pliers to grip the head of the first rivet. He twisted. It fought him, then snapped. He did it 4 more times. He put the tool in his pocket, gripped the edge of the panel, and pulled. It came off with a groan of metal. Behind it was a dark square hole cut into the car's insulation, and inside that hole was a matte black, waterproof Pelican case. Eli pulled it out. It was heavy. He set it on the floor, his heart a cold, steady drum. Shadow sat beside him, watching the box. Eli popped the latches. He lifted the lid. His breath caught. Gold. Dozens of gold double eagle coins, glinting in the dusty light. It was a fortune. Enough to buy a new life. Enough to start a war. Eli stared at it for a long, flat second. And then he got angry. He wouldn't do this, he whispered. Marcus Hemlock wasn't a bank robber. He was a professional soldier, a man of secrets and plans. Gold was loud. It was heavy. It was a target. Eli looked at Shadow. This is wrong. He ran his hand over the coins, feeling the bottom of the case. It was solid foam. He lifted the whole case. It was heavy. But was it heavy enough? This was the test. Hemlock was testing him, even from the grave. Eli put the case down. He ran his fingers along the inside edge of the case two's foam insert. His fingers caught on a small nylon tab hidden in the seam. He pulled it. The entire layer of foam and the gold lifted out as one solid piece. It was a decoy tray, and underneath it, in the true bottom of the box, lay a single object wrapped in oilskin. Eli's hands were steady as he lifted it out. He unwrapped the cloth. It was a simple black, leather-bound ledger. This was the weapon. The gold was just the landmine protecting it. Eli opened the book. The light from the door was just enough. The first page wasn't names. It was a map, hand-drawn, of the town and the surrounding valley. The following pages were filled with Hemlock's precise military-style handwriting. Dates, times, license plate numbers, GPS coordinates, and names. Dozens of names, but one name appeared over and over, linked to dates, cash transfers, and shipments. Sheriff R. Cole. Eli kept turning pages. He saw records of bribery, extortion, land seizures. Then he got to the last entry. It was dated 3 weeks ago. It wasn't a transaction. It was a statement. Cole moving suspect, East Ranch, 2300. Subject ID, B. Tannen, local hiker, reported missing. Cole's vehicle, county plates at GPS coordinates. 2 men, digging. Tannen did not return. Eli's blood ran cold. He turned the last page. Taped to the back cover was a folded newspaper clipping from the local paper, dated 2 weeks ago. The headline read, Tragic End to Search. Missing hiker found dead. Sheriff rules accidental fall. Eli snapped the book shut. The silence of the train car was absolute. He looked at Shadow. The dog was already on his feet, staring out the open doorway, his body coiled. He'd heard it too. The sound of a truck engine coming up the dirt road. Coming for them. The sound was a violation. It was the crunch of heavy-duty tires on gravel, a slow, methodical approach that was not accidental. It was a vehicle coming to them. Eli Vance didn't flinch. He didn't look up. He simply closed the ledger. His movements were fluid, economical. There was no time to re-hide the book in the wall. The wall was compromised. He slid the small, dense ledger into the waistband at the small of his back. The worn leather cold against his skin beneath his jacket. It was an uncomfortable, solid lump, a violation of his sterile principle, but it was the only option. Shadow, his canine, hadn't moved. The dog was a statue of black muscle, his body oriented toward the open door, his gaze locked on the place where the sound would become a threat. So that's the play, Eli whispered, more to himself than the dog. He looked at the open Pelican case on the floor. He saw the waterproof foam tray full of gold double eagles. The decoy. Eli's mind was a cold machine. He was being tested. By Hemlock. By whoever was outside. He made a split-second calculation. He calmly picked up the empty oilskin wrapper that had held the ledger. He didn't put it back in the case. He tossed it aside onto the dusty floor, as if it were trash. He left the pelican case open. He left the gold visible. He left the pried-off steel wall panel on the floor. He staged the scene to look exactly like what it was. A man who had just broken into a wall and found a box of treasure. He would not be the hunter. He would be the dumb, lucky heir. The truck engine idled down, shifting from a roar to a deep, confident rumble. A door opened and slammed shut. "Easy," Eli murmured to Shadow. The dog's ears twitched, but he held his position. Footsteps, heavy boots on gravel, walking with a purpose. They stopped 10 feet from the open car door. "That's far enough," Eli called out. His voice was flat, carrying easily in the dry air. A moment of silence, then a slow, appreciative chuckle. "Well now," a voice drawled. It was a voice used to giving orders, coated in a thick, folksy veneer. "That's not much of a welcome. Heard old Marcus Hemlock left this heap to his long-lost kin. Figured I'd come say howdy to the new neighbor." The shadow in the doorway was large, blocking the afternoon sun. A man stepped into the car, his presence sucking the air out of the space. He wore the tan uniform of the county sheriff. A polished badge, a heavy belt, and a holstered pistol he wore with the casual comfort of a carpenter wearing a hammer. He was big, not fat, with a sun-scorched face and pale blue eyes that seemed to be permanently smiling. It was the man from the ledger, Sheriff R. Cole. "You're R. Cole," Eli said. It wasn't a question. The sheriff's smile tightened, just a fraction. The friendliness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, flat assessment. "That's Sheriff Cole, son. And you are?" "Elias Vance." "Elias Vance," Cole repeated, rolling the name around. He looked around the ruined car, his eyes sweeping everything, missing nothing. He looked at Eli. He looked at the dog. "That's a serious animal you got there," Cole said, nodding at Shadow. The dog, in turn, was staring at Cole's right hand, the one nearest his holster. "He's retired," Eli said. "They never really are they?" Cole's gaze moved from the dog and finally landed on the floor. He saw the open panel. He saw the pelican case. His smile returned, but this time it was different. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. "Well, well," Cole said, stepping further into the car. Eli instinctively shifted his weight, keeping himself between the sheriff and the case, a subtle, territorial move. Cole noticed. "What do we have here, burglary tools?" Cole said, nudging the pry bar Eli had used. "Maintenance," Eli said. "Is that what we're calling it?" Cole laughed, taking the final step. He now stood directly over the box. He looked down at the gleaming gold double eagles. Eli watched him. He watched for the tell. A normal, non-guilty man would be shocked. Gold, he'd be excited, he'd ask questions. Sheriff Cole just stared. His eyes were flat. He looked at the gold not with surprise, but with profound annoyance, like a man who had ordered a steak and been brought a salad. This was the wrong treasure. "Huh," Cole said finally. "Looks like the rumors were true. Old Marcus really was a squirrel, hiding his nuts away." He crouched down, his knees popping, and ran his thick fingers through the coins. "Thing is, Mr. Vance," Cole said, not looking up, "when you find something like this on a property, it complicates things, causes paperwork, draws attention. Federals get involved. IRS, you know." "It was his," Eli said. "Was it?" Cole said, standing up. "Or was it stolen? How do you know?" "The note said it was mine." Cole's head snapped up. "The note?" Eli motioned to the letter from the lawyer. "The inheritance. He left me the car and its contents." Cole relaxed, but only slightly. "Yeah, the contents. You see, Marcus Hemlock was a complicated man. He kept his nose in other folks' business. Kept records." The word hung in the air, thick and heavy as the dust. Records. Cole was probing. He wasn't asking about the gold. He was asking about the ledger. "Don't know about that," Eli said, playing his part. "I just found this. Guess I'll take it to a bank." Cole actually laughed at that. A short, barking sound. "Oh, I don't think you'll do that, son. See, this is now part of an active investigation." "What investigation?" Cole's smile was gone. His face was granite. "Marcus Hemlock's death. We're not ruling it an accident anymore. We're treating it as a homicide. This was the lie that confirmed everything in the book. And this," Cole said, gesturing to the gold, "is now evidence. Needs to be impounded." "You're taking it," Eli stated. "I'm securing it for the investigation." Cole bent down to close the Pelican case. This was the final test. If Eli fought for the gold, he was just a greedy heir. If he let it go, he was something else. Fine, Eli said. Cole paused, his hand on the lid. He looked up at Eli, clearly surprised by the lack of resistance. He had expected an argument. Eli's easy compliance was, to him, more suspicious than any fight. Cole stood up slowly, leaving the case open. His eyes scanned Eli from his boots to his face. You don't care much for it, do you? A fortune in gold. It's not mine, Eli said. It's evidence. You said so. Cole held the stare for a long 10 seconds. The air was electric. Shadow, sensing the shift in tension, let out a low, almost inaudible growl, a rumble in his chest. Cole's eyes snapped to the dog. You best keep that thing on a short leash, Vance. He is, Eli said. Cole's face darkened. He snapped the Pelican case shut. I'll be in touch. My deputies will be by to secure this crime scene. He picked up the heavy case. Oh, and one more thing. I'd appreciate it if you stayed in town. We got a lot more to talk about. I'll be around, Eli said. Cole gave him one last hard look. I'm sure you will. The sheriff turned and walked out, his boots heavy on the wood. Eli and Shadow listened as he threw the case in the bed of his truck. The engine started. Eli stood motionless in the train car as the sound of the truck faded, leaving him in the red, dying light of the sunset. He was alone. He was a murder suspect. He had no gold. He reached behind his back and pulled out the ledger. He had the one thing that mattered, and the sheriff had just confirmed what it was worth. The truck's engine noise was swallowed by the high desert silence, a void so complete it felt like a pressure. Eli Vance stood in the failing light, the chill of the coming night seeping through the steel walls of the train car. The only warmth was the ledger in his hand and the living, breathing presence of the dog at his side. Well, boy, Eli rasped, his voice sounding loud in the quiet. He played his hand. Shadow whined, a low note of anxiety. The dog didn't just sense the tension. He understood the smell of it. The sheriff had coated the air in a scent of synthetic friendly aftershave and pure coppery adrenaline. Eli didn't move for a full minute. He was processing. Cole had taken the gold. That was the first move. It wasn't about the money, it was about establishing dominance. It was a seizure, a test to see how Eli would react. By not reacting, Eli had confused him. The second move, naming Eli a person of interest in a homicide. That was the leash. It meant Eli couldn't run. He couldn't sell the property. He was now legally tethered to this town. The third and most critical move. Cole had revealed his own hand. He'd mentioned records. He wasn't looking for gold. He was looking for this book. Eli slid the ledger back into his waistband. He had to assume Cole's deputies were, as promised, on their way. This train car was no longer a refuge. It was a crime scene under enemy control. He had to leave, but he couldn't go back to the airstream. If Cole was smart, and Eli had to assume he was, a second team would be on its way to his trailer right now. He and Shadow exited the car. Eli slid the heavy door almost shut, leaving it open just a crack, just as he'd found it. He didn't bother to hide the wall panel or the empty hole. Let them see. Let them think he was just a clumsy thief who got spooked. They didn't go toward the road. They melted into the landscape, moving west, away from the trailer, away from the siding. Eli moved toward the only place that offered concealment, a deep, dry riverbed, an arroyo half a mile away. It was full dark by the time they settled in a washout under a rocky overhang. It was a defensible position, offering a clear view of the surrounding plains. Eli sat, his back against the cold dirt, and pulled the ledger out. He couldn't read it, but he didn't need to. He needed to think. Hemlock, his old CO, had trained him. Never fight the battle the enemy expects, Vance. Make them come to your table. Right now, Cole was holding all the cards. He had the badge, the manpower, and the law on his side. Eli had a book that was, at this moment, useless. Its power was in its threat, not its content. The second Cole knew for sure Eli had it, Eli and his dog were dead. He had to change the game. He couldn't be the hunted. He had to become a problem. An hour passed, 2. Eli and Shadow watched the night. Then headlights, 2 sets. Just as he'd predicted, the first set, a county cruiser, went to the train siding. Its searchlight cut beams through the darkness, illuminating the car. The second set, a white, unmarked utility van, drove slowly, deliberately, up the dirt track toward his airstream. They were tossing his trailer, looking for the records. Eli watched the lights for a long time. Shadow, sensing his handler's cold anger, pressed his body firmly against Eli's leg. "They got me," Hemlock's note said. Eli finally understood. Hemlock hadn't been killed in a panic. He was hunted, just like this. He'd hidden the book, set the golden decoy, and then, as a final act, left a trail back to the one man in the world he knew was smart enough and loyal enough to finish the fight. He wasn't just left an inheritance, he was given a mission. "Okay, Marcus," Eli whispered into the dark. "I'm at your table." He waited until 3 a.m., when the human mind is at its lowest ebb. The deputies at the train car had settled in, their cruiser's engine a low rumble. The van at his trailer had finished its search and left an hour ago, finding nothing. Eli stood up, brushing dirt from his jeans. "Stay," he commanded. Shadow immediately lay down, a black-on-black shadow watching him. Eli moved. He stayed in the arroyo, using the terrain to cover his approach. He didn't go toward the train car. He looped wide, a 2-mile arc, coming up behind his own airstream. The van crew had been professionals. They hadn't smashed the place. They had searched it, systematically. Mattresses turned, food bins emptied, water tank checked. They were thorough. Eli walked past his violated home without a second glance. He went to his truck. The van crew had been here too. The glove box was open, the seats were slashed. This was the punishment part of the search. Eli knelt by the front right tire. He took his boot knife, the one he'd used on the train car wall, and sliced a 2-inch gash in the tire's sidewall. He did the same to the rear. He was cutting off his own escape. He walked back to the trailer. He took the small portable generator he used for power. He took a single 5-gallon can of gasoline. He walked the 2 miles back to the arroyo, picked up Shadow, and then walked another mile, arriving at the only paved road in the valley, Highway 87. He sat on the generator by the side of the dark road, Shadow at his feet, the ledger in his jacket, and the can of gasoline next to him. He waited. At 4:30 a.m., headlights appeared. Eli stood up. It was a long-haul semi, running produce to the coast. Eli grabbed the gas can. He didn't wave his arms. He stood in the center of the road, a dark silhouette, and held the red can up in the headlights, the universal signal of the stranded traveler. The semi's air brakes hissed, a monstrous, angry sound. The truck pulled to a stop 20 yards past him. The passenger door opened, and a weary-looking man leaned out. "You out of gas, friend?" the driver yelled. "Something like that," Eli yelled back. "My truck's dead up the pass. My dog and I are half frozen." "Well, get in. I ain't waiting all night. Can't take the generator, though." "Don't need it," Eli said. He grabbed Shadow, gave him the up command, and the dog bounded into the cab. Eli tossed the gas can in the dirt and climbed in after him. The driver, a man named Sal, didn't ask questions. He was more interested in complaining about his dispatcher. "Where you headed?" Sal asked. "Nearest town with a bus station." "That'd be Kingman. 2 hours," Sal grunted, grinding the gears. The truck roared back to life. As they pulled away, Eli looked back. In the valley, he could see the faint, isolated lights of the county cruiser, still guarding an empty train car. Sheriff Cole would wake up to find his person of interest had vanished. His tires were slashed, making it look like a desperate, panicked flight. He'd left his home, his generator, everything behind. Cole would assume Eli was running, scared, to sell the one thing he had, the gold. Except Cole had the gold. It was the perfect act of misdirection. Cole would spend the next 24 hours laughing, thinking he'd scared the air away. He would have no idea that Eli Vance, now armed with the ledger, was 100 miles away, already on the offensive. The bus station in Kingman, Arizona, smelled of industrial bleach and stale cigarettes. It was 5 a.m., the terminal fluorescent lights humming in a way that felt hostile to the few souls scattered on the hard plastic seats. Eli Vance walked through the sliding doors, a man who looked like he'd just lost a fight with the desert. He was caked in dust, his jacket stiff, his eyes carrying the red-rimmed exhaustion of a man who hadn't slept in 48 hours. Shadow, his K9, was a different story. The dog was alert, his head high, his presence a silent, coiled warning. They were a contradiction. A ghost of a man in his $1 million military-grade Shadow. "No dogs in the terminal, man," the half-asleep security guard mumbled, not even looking up from his phone. Eli didn't break stride. "He's a service animal." The guard looked up, annoyed. He saw the sharp, intelligent focus of the Malinois. He saw the cold, dead calm look in Eli's eyes. The guard suddenly decided it wasn't worth the paperwork. He looked back at his phone. Whatever. Eli's escape on the truck had bought him time. Now he had to use it. He was a ghost in a foreign city, 120 miles from the battlefield. But the battlefield was no longer the valley, it was the network. And Eli was a K9 handler. He knew that to control an asset, you didn't use a leash. You used leverage. His first stop was a gas station mini-mart. He bought a black coffee, a prepaid burner phone, and a $200 gift card. He paid in cash. His second stop was a cheap, no-name motel that advertised weekly rates and had a plywood board over one of its office windows. The man behind the glass was half dead. Need a room, Eli said. $40, cash, no ID, the man grunted. Fine, Eli said. 2 rules. I'm paying for 2 nights. You don't knock, you don't clean, you don't see me. The man looked at him. Second rule, I have a dog. He's a service animal. He stays with me. You try to come in that room, he won't let you. The man looked at Shadow. Shadow looked back, unblinking. Fine, the man said, sliding a key under the glass. Room 112, back corner. The room was a box. It smelled like mold and regret. Eli locked the door, bolted the chain, and jammed the cheap wooden chair under the knob. Guard, he commanded. Shadow immediately lay down, facing the door, his duty absolute. Eli didn't sleep. He sat on the floor, his back to the wall, and for the first time, he read the ledger. He didn't just scan it, he studied it, the way Hemlock had taught him to study a map before an operation. The names, the dates, the codes. It wasn't just Cole. Cole was just the hired gun, the muscle. Eli's blood ran colder. He saw the name Judge T. Holloway, followed by case numbers. He saw land deeds, all stamped void, all from families who had moved away. And he saw him, the name that made his stomach clench. A. Finch, S-Key, the nervous, sweating lawyer. His name was next to every fraudulent probate document, every land transfer, every legal signature that made the theft possible. Hemlock hadn't been investigating a corrupt cop. He had uncovered a conspiracy, a machine for stealing land. Eli's eyes scanned to the last page. A single entry, a memo. Lithium. They're after the lithium. The whole valley is sitting on it. They weren't just stealing farms. They were stealing a billion-dollar mine. Okay, Marcus, Eli whispered. I see it. Eli stood up. He left Shadow on guard and walked 3 blocks to a 24-hour copy shop. He paid the cashier, a bored college kid, in cash for 1 hour of computer time and use of the high-speed document scanner. He sat in the corner booth. He unwrapped the ledger. Click, whir, flash. One by one, he fed every page of Hemlock's meticulous, damning work into the machine. He digitized the entire weapon. He used the gift card to buy a 100-gigabyte encrypted cloud storage account under a fake name. He uploaded the file. Then he went to work. He created 3 new anonymous email accounts. He opened the first one and attached the ledger file. He typed in the addresses for the Arizona Attorney General, the FBI's Phoenix field office, and the top investigative reporter at the Arizona Republic. The subject line was simple. Evidence. Marcus Hemlock homicide, land fraud conspiracy, Coles County. He didn't write a message. The ledger spoke for itself. Then he scheduled the email. He set it to send, not immediately, but in exactly 72 hours. A dead man's switch. He did it twice more with the other 2 accounts, creating 2 more backups, scheduled to send at 73 and 74 hours. If Eli was captured, if he was killed, if he simply failed to log in and reset the timer, the bombs would go off. The whole conspiracy would be exposed. He now had insurance. He logged off, wiped the machine's cache, and walked back to the motel, the physical ledger back in his jacket. He sat on the floor of room 112, the sun just starting to crack the horizon. He was still a target, but now he was a poisoned target. It was time to make the first move. It was time to pull a thread on the network. He powered on the burner phone. He didn't call the FBI. He didn't call Cole. He chose the weak link, the man who was a participant, not a predator, the man who was already scared. He dialed the number for A. Finch S6, copied straight from the ledger. It rang 4 times. A shaky, sleep-filled voice answered. Hello? Finch and Associates. Mr. Finch, Eli said. His voice was low, flat, and full of the motel room shadows. Silence on the other end. Then a sharp, terrified intake of breath. Vance, Finch whispered. I'm looking at Hemlock's ledger, Eli said, his voice calm. The real one. The one Cole is still looking for. I don't know what you're talking about, Finch stammered, his voice cracking. My name is Elias Vance. Marcus Hemlock was my commander. And you, Eli said, his voice dropping to a razor's edge, are an accessory to his murder. A sound like a man choking. Please, you don't understand. Cole, he made me. Save it, Eli cut him off. Cole thinks I'm gone. He thinks he scared me off. He thinks he won. Eli let the silence stretch, a form of torture in itself. He's wrong, Eli continued. And right now, you are the only person in that valley who knows it. You have one chance, Arthur. You're going to tell me everything Cole doesn't know I know. You're going to be my eyes, or your name is the first one I circle when I send this book to the feds. Finch was crying now, a high-pitched, pathetic sound. What do you want? Everything, Eli said. We start with the Tannen murder. Tell me where the body really is. I don't know, the lawyer stammered, his voice thin, whistling with panic over the burner phone. Yes, you do. Eli's voice was a flat, cold line in the darkness of the motel room. You were there. Your name is in the ledger on the disposal. No, I wasn't there, Finch pleaded, his voice breaking into a wet, pathetic sob. I just did the paperwork. After. Cole. He just told me Tannen had left the state. He made me file the motion to vacate the missing person report. The body, Arthur, Eli cut him off. He used the man's first name, an act of false intimacy that was more threatening than a shout. Where did they put the hiker? I don't know, I swear to God. Cole's a cop. He wouldn't risk moving a body himself, not when he has deputies. But he's also a control freak. He wouldn't let them just dig a shallow grave. He'd want it gone. Permanent. Where, Arthur? Eli let the silence stretch, a tactic he'd learned from Hemlock. Let the target fill the void. Finch cracked. The old Lucky Boy mine, the lawyer whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. Up by the North Ridge. It's been condemned for 50 years. It's a straight 500-foot vertical shaft. They just dropped him. Cole joked about it. Said Tannen was exploring new depths. Oh God, he joked about it. Eli's eyes closed. He saw it. Clean, simple, irreversible. No digging, no smell. Just a gravity-assisted disappearance. Does he have it guarded? Eli asked. What? Why? No one goes up there. It's posted. They blew the entrance. It's just a grill now. Big enough to do what they did. One last thing, Arthur. When Cole's deputies tossed my trailer, what were they looking for? Be specific. The Hemlock files, that's what Cole calls them. He's obsessed. He thinks Marcus Hemlock had another book. A ledger, he called it. He's right, Eli said, a sharp intake of breath. You really have it? And I've digitized it, Eli said, adding the final turn of the screw. Copies are set to go to the feds and the Arizona Republic in 71 hours. Whether you live or die, Arthur, this is coming out. Your only chance is with me. What do you want from me? Finch whimpered. When Cole realizes I'm gone, you're going to be the one to find the slashed tires. You're going to be the one to tell him I was panicked, that I ran. You're going to be his man on the ground, and you're going to answer this phone every time I call. Understood? Yes. God, yes. Go back to bed, Arthur. Eli disconnected the call. He sat on the floor, the phone in his hand. The dead man's switch was ticking. 71 hours. It was a good insurance plan, but it was Hemlock's last resort, not his first. The feds would arrive, they'd seal the valley, and the real truth, the why, would be buried under a mountain of federal jurisdiction. Cole would get a lawyer. The judge would be investigated. Finch would be a star witness. The system would eat itself and nothing would really change. No, Hemlock hadn't left the mission to the feds. He'd left it to Eli. This had to be finished his way. The body was the leverage. He had to get back, but he couldn't go back as Elias Vance, the rattled heir. He had to go back as a ghost. He and Shadow left the motel before sunrise, leaving the key in the room, 2 nights' cash on the stained table. They walked the pre-dawn streets of Kingman, just another man and his dog keeping to the shadows. Eli's stranded traveler act had been good, but it meant he was now a man with no vehicle, 120 miles from his objective, with his face likely on an internal bolo. Be on the lookout. List for Cole's department. He needed a vehicle that was as invisible as he was. He found it 3 hours later, on a dusty back lot near the edge of town, under a "For Sale by Owner" sign. It was a 1989 Toyota pickup. Not the classic, just old. It was sun-beaten white, with a cancerous rust spot eating the passenger side wheel well. One headlight was a cracked, yellowed plastic. The Ford WD logo on the side was a peeling sticker. A tired-looking man in a greasy John Deere hat was sitting on the porch of the house. Eli walked up. "Your truck?" "She is," the man said, spitting tobacco juice. "Huh? How's she run?" "She runs. Need to get to Flagstaff. Think she'll make it?" Eli lied. The man squinted. "She'll make it to the moon, long as you keep her full of oil and anger. Four-wheel drive works. That's about it. Heater's shot. AC's a fantasy. $900. Cash." "I'll give you 700, Eli said. "Sold." 30 minutes later, the title was signed over with a fake name Eli had bought from the same gas station as the phone. The plates were technically legal, and Eli was $700 poor. He spent his last $200 on 2 5-gallon gas cans, a case of oil, a case of water, a detailed paper topographical map of the region, and a bag of jerky. He pulled into an alley, filled the tank in the new cans, and let Shadow hop into the passenger seat. They did not take the highway. Eli drove south, out of Kingman, and then turned east, onto a Bureau of Land Management road, a dirt track that was little more than a suggestion. For the next 8 hours, he drove. He was in his element. This was Kunar. This was the high desert. He navigated not by signs, but by the sun, by the shape of the ridges, by the lines on the topo map. The old truck complained, its frame groaning, but the 4WD engaged with a solid clunk. It clawed its way up dry arroyos, through rock fields and across empty sun-blasted plains. Shadow sat quietly, his place command absolute, his head turning to watch the empty world go by. By 9 p.m. they were back, not in the valley, but on the ridge above it. The Lucky Boy mine was 2 miles from his position. He killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was absolute. Below, the valley was a sea of blackness. He could see the small, clustered lights of the town, 15 miles away. He could see the lone, blinking red light of the county radio tower. He was in the heart of Cole's territory, but he was high up. He was on the flank. He was where they weren't. He got out of the truck and let Shadow clear the area. He drank a full liter of water. He was exhausted, but his mind was sharp, clear, and cold. He had 63 hours left on the dead man's switch. He looked down at the lights of the town. "I'm back, Cole," he whispered, not to the sheriff, but to the darkness. "I'm back." There was no moon. The ridge was a landscape of ankle-breaking shadows, the air thin and cold. Eli Vance moved through it with a slow, practiced patience. He had left the old Toyota hidden in a cluster of rocks 2 miles back. He was on foot, carrying only water, the burner phone, and the ledger, which felt like a block of ice against his back. Shadow, his canine, was a ghost at his side. The dog was in his element. This was not a walk, it was a silent patrol. Eli didn't use a flashlight. He navigated by the topographical map he had memorized, his boots feeling the texture of the ground, his eyes tracing the silhouette of the ridge against the stars. The Lucky Boy mine was just ahead, a blacker spot in the dark. Finch's voice, thin and reedy with terror, echoed in his head. A 500-foot vertical shaft. They just dropped him. Eli had to be sure. The dead man's switch was ticking, 62 hours, but it was an indiscriminate weapon. It would burn the valley, but it wouldn't prove the Tannen murder. For that, he needed something more. He stopped 50 yards from the mine's location. "Watch," he whispered. Shadow fanned out, a dark blur circling the perimeter, sniffing the air for any immediate living threat. He returned to Eli's side and sat. Clear. Eli approached. The mine wasn't a cave. It was an industrial scar, a gaping 15-foot-wide hole in the earth. A heavy-duty steel grill, thick as a man's arm and rusted deep orange, was bolted over the shaft. Finch was right. It wasn't meant to keep people out. It was meant to keep them from falling in. A small cut section of the grill was hinged, held shut by a heavy chain and a modern padlock. Cole's private disposal chute. Eli knelt at the edge. A blast of cold, damp air rose from the shaft, carrying the mineral scent of deep earth, iron, copper, and something else. He picked up a loose rock, the size of his fist, and dropped it through the grill. He listened. 1 second, two, three, four. He never heard it land. His stomach clenched. This was the place. Finch was telling the truth. But he needed proof. A court couldn't prosecute a hunch. He had come here for the one thing his partner, Shadow, was trained to find. Eli reached down and unclipped the short lead from Shadow's tactical harness. The dog, sensing the shift in protocol, immediately stood, his body vibrating with focus. Eli moved to the upwind side of the shaft. He knelt in front of his dog, his face inches from the Malinois. "Shadow," he said, his voice quiet, intense. The dog's ears pricked, his dark eyes locked on Eli's. This wasn't a seek command for a living person. This wasn't attack. This was the most specialized training they had, the one Eli had drilled with hemlock on mock graves in the high desert of Fort Bragg. He gave the soft two-word command, "Find dead." Shadow didn't move for a full second. He was processing the command. Then he lowered his head and began to work. He didn't sniff the grill. He stepped back, into the plume of cold air rising from the shaft. He was air scenting, sampling the molecules that were rising from the 500-foot column. He walked a slow half circle, his nose up. He stopped, his body tensing. He tasted the air again. Eli watched his dog, his heart pounding a slow, cold rhythm. He knew this sequence. Shadow's body changed. His hunting drive, normally a high-strung, frantic search, became something else. It became slow, methodical, somber. This was the tell of a trained human remains detection dog. He was confirming the presence of human decomposition. The dog moved closer to the grill. He sniffed the rising air hard. Then he gave the final alert. He did not bark. He did not whine. He simply sat perfectly still, his body rigid, and stared straight back at Eli. It was the most profound yes in the world. A wave of ice rolled through Eli. Tannen is down there. Hemlock's last entry was true. Cole was not just a corrupt cop. He was a murderer. "Good boy," Eli whispered, the words catching in his throat. He clipped the lead back on. He had it, the confirmation. He could call Finch, get a statement, and add it to the digital package. It was done. And then Shadow's head snapped up. His ears went flat. A low guttural rumble, a sound Eli had not heard since Afghanistan, vibrated in the dog's chest. It was the threat warning. "Easy," Eli whispered, his hand going to the dog's neck. He heard it too, headlights, a vehicle. Not on the highway miles below, but up here. On the ridge, coming this way. "Back," Eli commanded. In one fluid motion, man and dog were gone, melting back into the rocks, 100 yards upslope from the mine. They found a deep shadow in a cluster of boulders, a perfect overwatch position. Eli's mind raced. Cole? Deputies? It made no sense. Why would they come up here at this hour unless... The truck appeared. It wasn't a county cruiser. It was the white utility van from his trailer, the one with no markings. It pulled to a stop, its high beams cutting white slashes across the mine's grill. Two men got out. They weren't in uniform. They were the same men Eli had seen from his Airstream, moving with professional, concise energy. They unlocked the padlock and swung the heavy grill door open. "Shit, this stinks," one of them said, his voice carrying in the still air. "Just get it done," the other said. They walked to the back of the van and opened the doors. Eli watched, his blood freezing. He was expecting another body. It was worse. They pulled out heavy 55-gallon drums sealed with steel lids. Barrels. "Hurry up," the first man grunted as they muscled a drum to the edge of the shaft. "This is the last of the Tannen shipment," the second man said. "The new wells on the South Ridge go live next week. We'll use the Arroyo for those." They weren't hiding Tannen. They were bearing his name under toxic waste. The lithium. The land grab. Eli understood. This wasn't just a grave. It was a chemical dump. They were poisoning the aquifer, the deep earth water, the lifeblood of the entire valley. They were making the farms they couldn't buy worthless, so the company Hemlock had mentioned could seize the land for pennies. This was the real crime. Tannen hadn't just been a hiker. He'd seen this. Eli's mission changed. The dead man's switch was no longer enough. The feds would find a body. They wouldn't find this. He pulled the burner phone from his pocket. The risk was enormous. The phone's light was a beacon, but he had no choice. He cupped the phone in his hands, shielding the light with his jacket. He turned on the video camera. The zoom was terrible. The light from the van's headlights was all he had, but it was enough. He held the phone steady, his hand braced on the rock. He filmed as the two men tipped the first barrel over the edge. It vanished into the black, its rumble fading to nothing. He filmed them, grabbed the second one. He was no longer just an avenger. He was a witness. Eli's thumb was numb. He was holding the burner phone so steady, so still, that the muscles in his hand had begun to ache. The phone's cheap lens was drinking in the scene, the tinny microphone recording the scrape of metal on rock. This is the last of the tannin shipment. The man's voice, thin and distant, was captured. Eli watched them tip the final 55-gallon drum into the blackness of the shaft. It was done. The hiker, Marcus Hemlock, and the valley itself had all been buried under the same tide of toxic, calculated greed. The two men, satisfied, slammed the back doors of the white utility van. One of them rechained the grill, snapping the heavy padlock shut. They were professionals. They were clean. They got in the van. Eli didn't move. He kept recording. He filmed the van's headlights cutting a bright three-point turn on the rocky plateau. He filmed it driving away, its red taillights shrinking until they were just two angry, receding eyes. Only when they were gone did he lower the phone. He hit stop. The file saved. 0432.mp4. Shadow, who had been a statue of compressed energy at his side, let out a single pressurized woof of air. "I know," Eli whispered. He stood up, his legs stiff from the cold. He was a ghost on a mountain of the dead. And he was, finally, angry. The dead man's switch was ticking. 61 hours. The feds would get the ledger. They would get a murder conspiracy. But this video, this was different. This wasn't a 10-year-old cold case. This was a now crime. This was the evidence that couldn't be buried in paperwork. The video didn't just support the ledger. The ledger now existed to explain the video. He didn't need 61 hours. He didn't need the feds. He had the weapon, and he had the target. Eli pulled the burner phone back out. He didn't walk back to his truck. He stood on the ridge, a single dark silhouette against the pre-dawn glow, and dialed the number for the county dispatch. "Sheriff's dispatch. What's your emergency?" a tired voice answered. "I need to talk to Sheriff Cole," Eli said. "Sir, it's 4 a.m. The sheriff is not available." "This is Elias Vance," Eli said, his voice a cold, flat blade. "I'm the man you're investigating for the Hemlock murder. You tell Cole he has 60 seconds to pick up his personal cell phone, or the video I just took of his men dumping chemical waste into the Lucky Boy mine goes straight to the Arizona Republic." A sharp, terrified silence. "Please hold." It wasn't 60 seconds, it was 10. Eli's burner buzzed with an incoming call. "Unknown number," he answered. "Vance," a voice like gravel and fury snarled. It was Cole. "What is this? What have you done, you little shit?" "I'm at the mine, Sheriff," Eli said calmly. He could hear the wind, and only the wind on his end. On Cole's end, he could hear a television, the rustle of sheets, a man caught completely off guard. "You're a fool," Cole spat. "You're trespassing. You're fabricating." "I have a 4-minute video, time-stamped. It shows two of your men in your white utility van, license plate 29er X-ray Delta, dumping the last of the tannin shipment into the mine shaft. Your words, not mine." A dead, heavy silence. The sound of a man's entire world collapsing. "What do you want?" Cole finally whispered. "My old CO, Marcus Hemlock, he trained me," Eli said, his voice distant, almost conversational. "He taught me that you don't fight a man, you fight his position. And your position, Sheriff, is gone. Vance, we can make a deal. You don't know what you're mixed up in. This is bigger than just some land. There's money, a lot of money." "I know, lithium," Eli said. "I know about the judge. I know about Finch. I know about the poison aquifer. I know you murdered a hiker named Tannen because he saw what I just saw." Cole was breathing hard now, a wet, panicked sound. "The feds. You send that, you're a dead man. I'm a dead man. We're all dead." "That's the 60-hour plan, Sheriff," Eli said. "The dead man's switch. My digital copies go out no matter what. Unless what? Hope, desperate and ugly. Unless the handler calls it off," Eli said. "And I am the handler. And you, Sheriff, are my new K9. What do you want me to do? You're going to pick up your radio, the one you think makes you a king, and you are going to burn your own house down. Right now." "What do you mean?" "I'm sending you a text," Eli said. He hung up. He typed out the license plate number. He typed anonymous tip, illegal dumping, Lucky Boy mine. He attached the 4-minute video file, and he sent it to Cole's personal cell. He immediately redialed. Cole answered on the first ring. "You see it?" Eli asked. You crazy bastard," Cole was whispering. That's a video. "Here's the new plan, Sheriff. You have that video. You are going to forward it to your deputies, all of them. You're going to tell them you just received an anonymous tip from a concerned citizen. You are going to order a full-scale, lights and sirens response to the Lucky Boy mine to secure the crime scene." "No, I can't." "Then you're going to call Judge Holloway," Eli continued, his voice relentless. "You're going to tell him the same thing. You're going to tell him the Hemlock files are real and they're going public. You're going to tell him the party's over." "They'll kill me, the company. They'll kill me." "Probably," Eli said, "but I'll kill you faster. I'm on this ridge, Cole. I'm watching. I'm the ghost Hemlock sent. You have 1 hour to flip, or I flip the switch on the whole state. Your choice. Be a cop for the first time in your life, or be the fool who lost $1 billion conspiracy." Eli disconnected the call. He sat his back against the rock and waited. Shadow laid his head on Eli's knee. 10 minutes passed, an eternity. Then in the far distance, down in the Black Valley, a single siren wailed. Then another. Eli stood up. He watched as a string of blue and red lights began to snake its way up the long, winding road to the ridge. Cole had made his choice. Eli reached into his jacket and pulled out the small black leather ledger. He opened it, looked at the last damning entry Hemlock had written. "It's done, Marcus," he whispered. He put the book back in his jacket. He and Shadow turned away from the arriving lights, and as the first hint of the sun broke the eastern horizon, they disappeared back into the high desert, two ghosts walking home. Thank you so much for following this story, for sticking with Eli and Shadow as we built this world, this mystery and this climax together. As a creator, there's nothing more valuable than an audience who is right there with you in the trenches. But every story, even when it ends, leaves a few questions. We know what happened to Cole, but what do you think should happen to the lawyer, Finch? Does he deserve to go to prison, or did he earn a second chance? Let me know in the comments.